Hi everyone, it's nice to be here. I made this cover screen to play around with my typeface bridge. I tried creating a little battery icon using its different punctuation marks. Now, before we get started, I have a few disclaimers. Nothing major, I just want to manage expectations. First, I am non-indigenous to my birthplace because both of my parents immigrated there. Second, my recount on the history of Guam is incomplete. I grew up on the island and learned the history through primary schooling, interactions with neighbors, and personal research later in life. As a content warning, a small portion of the presentation includes information regarding violence. So this brings me to my third disclaimer. I am labeling my presentation as a guide to understanding the conceptual relationship between my historical and contemporary knowledge of the island and the design of my typeface bridge. One last bit, I would like to thank Type Weekend for inviting me to participate. Additionally, I'd like to acknowledge a few entities that have been a part of the type design and research aspect of my life so far, which includes the Alphabets, Letterform Archive, and the Rhode Island School of Design. Today my presentation lives under the title Paradox Paradise, a meditation on Guam's history with acculturation. I'm going to frame two words as to fine-tune what I'll be talking about. When I say meditation, I am thinking about Guam's history in a repetitive, contemplative manner, and letting certain aspects of these thoughts imbue my design choices. In my little graphics below, I used bridges glyphs to abstractly represent my process of meditation. On a more sociological bend, I use the word acculturation. Again, I represent it with abstract symbols. This particular pound hashtag symbol in this quote-unquote formula stands in as a culture when combined or confronted with a different culture, typically a domineering one, and yields a modified version of the initial culture, subjectively for better or for worse. In relation to the island of Guam, the tension for better or for worse largely depends on which era of external rule we're referring to. Island control by external ruling entities has changed hands over the last 6 centuries, but for the sake of time, we will most closely look at the ongoing affair with the United States and snippets of Japan. Before focusing on the ongoing affair with the United States, we need to do a little bit of setup. When the United States liberated the island from Japan, the islanders were grateful because of the poor conditions of the prison camps, which involved torture, among other things. Post-liberation, the United States created the Organic Act of 1951 as a way to bring the island under their neo-colonial campaign. This act granted islanders U.S. citizenship, but was arguably structured in a way that indefinitely locked the island into its current status as an unincorporated territory. One of the major caveats of this particular political status is not being given the opportunity to vote for president. These types of oversights, or intentional hindrances, spilled into various aspects of life, including commerce. Once exclusively the United States' westernmost military outpost, it began to have a growing need to provide the troops with leisure activities. The necessity for an economic shift to provide these activities concerned many public figures, particularly Dr. Pedro Sanchez, one of the very few Chamorro officials in a government saturated with mainland American military officials, not politicians or indigenous peoples. Dr. Sanchez warned of the shortcomings in this proposed economic shift, noting that economic systems are not one size fits all, and how these changes will drastically influence and even obscure important aspects of indigenous culture. It turns out Dr. Sanchez's thoughts in his 1972 speech, Paradox of a Paradise, rang true, particularly today and in the coming years of the island. The United States military presence on the island has grown dramatically since Liberation Day in 1944. The military possesses about a third of the island's landmass, which includes some ancestral land, and whose possessions grow by the year. Growing up on the island, I heard this type of news on a regular basis, and I even had an aunt who was on food stamp because she was unable to work due to her lupus, an autoimmune disease, which made it impossible to hold a traditional job. As an alternative, she was like a second mother to me, and was the first person to introduce me to art, video games, writing, and music. She greatly influenced the foundations of my current practice. As of 2016, she's not with us anymore, but she is one of the reasons I am proud to identify as biracial, my father being Irish and my mother being Filipino, as genderfluid because gender is a social construct and choosing one sounds like a death sentence, as an artist plus designer, which sometimes frustrates me because I see the two as intertwined, but the word creative as a noun bugs me for some reason. And as a Guamanian-American, because I wasn't born on the mainland, and I've lived there longer than I've lived here. I'm not sure what I'm going to start saying in 3 years, when the years spent in each place becomes the same amount. To better connect design and culture, I asked myself, why was I drawn to the pixel aesthetic? For me, playing video games was a way of spending time with friends and family. But video games would not have existed on the island without the presence of Japan and the United States. This pixel aesthetic for me became a metaphor for the island's acculturation during the late 20th century, which fed my thoughts regarding the visibility of culture. My experiments in pushing the boundaries of readability brought about the following images where I focus on the idea of illegible words as a form of visual code, and these codes becoming images. To start off, we have the Latin caps for English. Altogether, we see how the legible characters inform the reading of the illegible characters. Each style is named after a resolution, meaning the size of the grid each character was designed on, or translated onto create the character. For example, the top line is bridge resolution 3x3, meaning the characters are based on a 3x3 grid. I was interested in how parameters affected legibility, which reminded me of how the changing physical parameters, or land holdings, of the U.S. military on the island profoundly affects the visibility of indigenous culture. In this drawing, I create a narrative of animal imagery relevant to the island with a verse that reads, "When they arrive, snakes invade, birds fly away, corpses drop when they arrive." The ominous "they" refers to the negative aspects brought about by the U.S. military presence. For example, in 1950, the brown tree snake was a stowaway on a military ship and became an invasive species. By 1980, the native bird population was nearly decimated by these snakes. Then, in 2010, local authorities developed an odd method to curb the overpopulation of the snakes by dropping dead mice filled with a liquid akin to Tylenol, which puts the snakes out. There was something shocking yet rhythmic about the timing of these events. 30 years worth of spacing. Piecing these events together felt like creating the opening scene for a video game, like, here's all this weird stuff happening now. Now go on a journey and try to fix it. For Welcome to Paradox Paradise, I extend the idea of an opening screen for a video game by using the language of downloading and opening computer files. This particular image expands on the line "birds fly away" from the previous image. In my thought process, the presence of the U.S. military led me to consider the words "war game," meaning a military exercise carried out to test or improve tactical expertise. In video games, a player must also exercise their skills to perfect a different type of tactile expertise. It seemed natural to connect the idea of war game to video game under a pixel aesthetic. This piece, Windows Upon Windows, uses bridge resolution 3x3 as the main compositional component and creates a barely legible string of words, which doubles as the image of the design. The concept of this design goes a bit outside of the realm I created in regards to video games by branching the pixel aesthetic out to considering the gamification of the internet, specifically social media. For example, the social currency and potential monetization of being internet famous or having an online business. This spread is of a literature review I created under the shortened title Video Games, and talks about how the current system of categorizing video games by genre limits our understanding of its gameplay, and further limits our understanding of gender in terms of the characters presented to us, and even further limits our capacity as a society to accept gender identifications outside of the male-female and man-woman binary, which conflates gender and sex, the two of which that are not interchangeable. I created this booklet by drawing influences from gaming consoles like the Nintendo DS. Additionally, I possess an interest in economics and globalization. A portion of this booklet includes information about the unique video game markets in Japan, the United States, and the United Kingdom. In the future, I'd like to research and examine the island's location as a cultural crossroad for Japan and the United States, and consider different aspects of the United Kingdom's independent and creative scene to create a new lens for global commerce. Additionally, I produced physical packaging for the typeface by designing a series of stickers to adhere to SD cards, inspired by video game cartridges, and placing a digital copy of the typeface file on each card. The size of the SD card roughly resembles a Nintendo DS cartridge. PX-PE is short for Paradox Paradise, and the numberings of each SD card marks the resolution of each style. For my last piece of this talk, I'm showing a screenshot of a font tester I recently coded for all 9 styles of bridge. Feel free to test it out at mderpth.com/bridge-font-tester. mderpth being spelled as MDERPTH. And now resources. If you are interested in learning more about the island of Guam, please internet search one of these sources, such as Guampedia.com, MARC, or the Micronesian Area Research Center at the University of Guam, and the Independent Guahan Facebook page. And this is my contact information, if you'd like to get in touch. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and you can reach me on Instagram through my artist account, which is mderpth, MDERPTH, or emailing me at msbdevlin@gmail.com, msbdevlin. Thank you.